Welcome to Module 2 in the CTIA class. We're going to talk about cyber threats and the kill chain methodology. Let's get started. The objective of this module is to understand the stages of an attack and also some of the scenarios, deep dive scenarios, to help you build appropriate mitigation and defensive mechanisms to protect your organization from those threats, be they known threats or unknown threats. Let's look at what we're going to discuss in this module. Number one, we're going to look at an overview of cyber threats. Some of these may be ones you've heard of before, others may be unfamiliar. We'll talk about them. We'll look at the threat categories. We'll also look at the threat actors and profiling the attacker. So who is the attacker? Who are these threat actors? How do we profile them? We're going to find this very important as part of the kill chain methodology. And then we'll look at threat intent, capability, and opportunity. This is a triad that we'll discuss. We'll look at motives and goals of the attackers, and then we'll have a look at some hacking forums, among other things. So let's get started with an overview of cyber threats. What is a threat? Well, it's an act that an adversary uses to attempt to gain unauthorized access to an organization. They're going to exploit communication pathways, they're going to exploit protocols, exploit programs in order to gain unauthorized access. And they use these to infiltrate and steal data. PII, personal information, financial information, login credentials, passwords, information about the system itself. There is so much information that a would-be attacker can get from a system. So there are many different cybersecurity attack vectors. The first one we see is cloud computing threats. And cloud computing threats don't usually come from the cloud. Cloud computing threats are usually on the local system, the interface to the cloud, the protocols that are used to interface with the cloud, the local implementation of cloud access, the security and type and length of passwords, etc. So it's less likely that your cloud account will be compromised. It's more likely that your local account will be compromised, giving an attacker access to the cloud resources that are there. Yes, there are many different cloud hacking techniques, and cloud accounts and cloud organizations have been compromised, also leading to large dumps of passwords. And if you look at these password dumps, you can go to sites to download the actual password dump file. Most of those passwords are extremely simplistic passwords, meaning that the organization that set up the cloud account or the individuals did not have proper password hygiene. So again, we go back to problems with the local interface to the cloud. Either way, there are cloud threats. We also have APTs, or advanced persistent threats. Now, advanced meaning that we're using a technique that is advanced, but persistent is the key here. What we're going to do with an APT is stay on that system for a long time in order to gather data. We also have viruses and worms. We'll talk about the differences between those as we get into this part of the class. We have ransomware. We have mobile threats. This is becoming a much bigger deal as more and more of the universe is going mobile. We have botnets and insider threats and phishing in its various forms. We have web application threats and IoT threats. Let's look at the threats divided into different categories. The first one we have is a network threat. With a network threat, the first phase of an attack is going to include information gathering. And we'll see this when we talk later on about the pyramid of pain. We see that is a part of that pyramid. Information gathering, sniffing, eavesdropping, using tools like Wireshark, Nmap, and other tools to go grab information about the network. Spoofing users at the high level, at the low level, spoofing MAC addresses and IP addresses. Session hijacking and man-in-the-middle attacks, taking over that session and using that session information to gain access to a resource, a host, a server. We have ARP and DNS poisoning. When ARP goes out on a network, it sends a broadcast and it says, hey, I am IP address 1.1.1.1. Are you IP address 1.1.1.2? And it sends a broadcast with the MAC address of the originating host, and that gets repeated out to the network, and 1.1.1.2 responds back and says, yes, here I am, and here's my MAC address. That information goes into the ARP cache, and if a hacker can change that ARP cache and have the host be sent to 1.1.1.3 instead, which might be the hacker machine, then we've corrupted the ARP cache. Same with DNS. DNS is a small database that has domain names, FQDNs, fully qualified domain names, like domain1.com or something like that, that is mapped to an IP address. And if you can change the IP address mapping, then you can redirect traffic to a hacker computer of some sort. We also have we also have password-based attacks, which go directly to the heart and try to steal that password, try to crack the hashes of that password, or compromise the password system. We also have denial of service attacks on the network, shutting down that network with a huge fusillade of frames or packets. We have compromised key attacks. This is where we have key, if you look at how we encrypt and secure traffic going from one host to another, that involves the use of keys, and some of these keys can be compromised. Firewall and IDS attacks. We can use fragmentation attacks and many other techniques to get around the firewall or around the intrusion detection or prevention system. All of this is at the network level, at the network edge. Also, we have host threats. So if you can get through the network, we move now into the host with a malware attack. There are various methods and means of doing malware attacks. We'll talk about some of these, but they include sending texts, spear phishing, which will mean that the user is attacked because of their status in the organization. And with that spear phishing attack, we send malware, and that malware has a specific purpose. We have footprinting to try to get the lay of the land of the host and find out what ports are open, what is behind those ports, and profiling to find out what types of machine, what type of software, what types of services or daemons are running on that host. And then, just like with network attacks or with application threats, we have password attacks. Anywhere there's a password, we can have a password attack. And we have denial of service attacks. Same on the network as on hosts. We can shut down that host. Unauthorized access. Getting access to the host when you're not supposed to. Privilege escalation is also a form of attack, meaning that we may gain access to the host, but at a low level, a guest account, a user account, and what we really need is a root account. Backdoor attacks, allowing an attacker to take control of a host anytime they want through a backdoor methodology. The user will never know. Also, we have physical security threats. I always see this, I imagine somebody with a router on their shoulder and cables dangling out as they run out of the building with the router. They stole that thing. This is a physical security threat. Or if they can somehow get access to the device by getting to it in the plenum, or you have servers that are not locked up. Physical security threats. We also have application threats. And with application threats, normally we have multiple tiers of applications that service our users. And if we don't properly validate input into forms for those applications, it can allow people to do a great number of things, including traversing the file system, doing SQLI attacks, SQL injection attacks, and many others. Though input has to be validated. We have authentication and authorization attacks. Again, because applications usually don't just let any entity use the app that wants to. Instead, they have to be authenticated and authorized. And so we can attack that level of the application. security misconfiguration. Again, this is one of the things because people make mistakes. They have improperly secured the system, perhaps using protocols that are known to be security holes. Information disclosure, where information about the system, about the users on the system, about the software is inadvertently disclosed, allowing an attacker to get a better chance to gain access to that application stack. Also, hidden field tampering and broken session management and buffer overflow issues. We can go on and on. Each one of these is an entire week's worth of class as to how these are conducted. Cryptography attacks. I already mentioned SQL injection and phishing, improper error handling, and exception management. Again, that goes right along with improper data input and validation. And on the application side, one of the big issues that I've seen in my past is the rush to market. Rush to market, where a developer or a team of developers will be working on getting a product done. They've had some issues. They're working on tightening up the security on the application. They are still in beta, and all of a sudden they get a directive by upper management. This software needs to be deployed. I don't know what's taking you so long. And I tell you what, it needs to be deployed by Thursday. And so what happens is we get a piece of software that's rushed out. Yes, it works. It's pretty. It's nice. It makes very good money for the company initially, but it has improper data input validation, improper error handling. It may have buffer overflow issues, and many other things. So, and the application threat, this really goes to the dev team who's developing the app, as well as the dev team who made the app that you may have purchased. So always keep track of application threats. So those are the three major categories: network, host, and application. So who is it that is doing these attacks? Who are the threat actors? We want to be able to profile the attacker. Have you ever had a cold? I know that's a weird question, but maybe the flu or some other type of virus or bacterial problem. Who is it that made that virus or that attacking bacteria? Is there some evil scientist in a lab coat coming out with new viruses and bacteria? Well, not yet. But these are naturally occurring viruses and bacteria. But for every piece of malware, for every virus, for every worm out there, somebody is out there actually creating these and then setting them loose for nefarious purposes. So let's talk about some of the people that not only make viruses and worms and so on, but also launch attacks using those and a plethora of other techniques against our systems. Who are these people? Number one, a hacktivist. Who is an hacktivist? It's an individual who wants to promote a political agenda by hacking, especially defacing or disabling websites. You know, there used to be Linux hacktivists back in the 90s or so, early 90s, that were anti-Microsoft. And they weren't all Linux hacktivists. It was before Linux was a big thing. They were anti-Microsoft hacktivists, and they had defaced some Microsoft sites or whatever. So whatever the big political or activist goal that some groups have, sometimes they'll use that and hack with those goals in mind. A cyber terrorist. This is an individual that usually has a certain set of skills, a wide range of skills motivated by religious, political beliefs to create fear and a large-scale disruption of computer networks. With cyber terrorists, we're really talking about nation states in some cases, and in other cases, small groups of terrorist activists that want to take down and wreck command and control systems, commerce systems, etc. Suicide hackers. Suicide hackers want to bring down critical infrastructure for a cause, maybe cyber terrorism or hacktivism, but they don't care if they get caught. They don't care about going to jail. So they'll throw everything at it and even be out there in the open where you can see what they're doing until the cops come or the FBI or whatever agency comes and takes them away in handcuffs. Those are suicide hackers. They don't care. They're going to get it done. We also have state-sponsored hackers. So I mentioned state-sponsored hackers in terms of cyber terrorism, but the vast majority of state-sponsored hackers are not cyber terrorists. They are just military. That's a new branch of the military. In the United States, we have the U.S. Space Command, but underlying the Space Command, Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, you'll see a structure called the United States Cyber Command. Every organization, every country in the world that has a proper organization will have some type of cyber command. So where it be the Russian Federation or the European Union, the specific nation states in the European Union, or China, or the United States of America, North Korea, all have this type of state-sponsored hacking. It used to be that in order to conduct operations, military operations, and to use command and control techniques, one of the first things that you would do is get rid of the ability of the enemy to communicate by, for instance, blanketing the area with static, and then from there taking down their aircraft and anti-aircraft theater, go in that theater and take that down, and then after that you soften it up with tanks and you send them in troops, right? That was the old days. That was so 10 years ago. Now what we do is we start with a cyber attack, because for all modern armies, the vast majority of command and control is run through the same protocols that we use on the internet. So that's going to be the first level of attack. So state-sponsored hackers are a big deal. They're employed by governments to penetrate and gain top secret information and damage information systems of other governments. They are also there as the first level of warfare. Next is organized hackers. These are professional hackers that have the aim of attacking systems for profit. You know, there used to be a time not too long ago when we had a lot of lone wolf hackers, hackers that maybe worked by themselves or maybe now and then teamed up with another black hat hacker to wreak havoc, to try to steal things, make money, etc. And some of these hackers over time were approached by organized crime. Organized crime said, hey buddy, you're a great hacker. We've seen you on the forums, and you know, you've been making kind of pennies doing what you do, but you know, if you work for us, we can make you a millionaire in 5 years. And they take their hacking into organized crime. So the vast majority of the biggest hacks that you've seen these days are done by organized crime. The next we have is script kiddies. It's 4:30 in the afternoon. You're at work. Your 12-year-old is at home. What are they doing? Well, you know, Minecraft got boring, so they looked at some hacker videos and now they're hacking, taking down the local businesses and stuff like that. But it's not just 12-year-olds. It's people your age and my age that are using tools that are easy to find, easy to download, following videos and scripts, and are able to hack at what would have been in the past a fairly high level because the tools are so readily available and easy to use. So those are script kiddies, right? Using tools and software developed by real hackers. They're not developing their own tools. Next, we have industrial spies. In this case, you might have an organization that's a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and then you may have another organization that's a multi-million or multi-billion-dollar corporation, and there's a product perhaps that's about to be released, and we want to make sure that that product doesn't get released before my product is released. Or we want to find out information on the product that's going to be released. Or we want to mess up the product release. And so surreptitiously slip some code in there to make them have problems, or maybe change their reputation. Maybe do a hack that makes it look like they can't be trusted to put out their next product. So when my product comes out, I have a better reputation. So you can bet that there are industrial hacks that are going on between some of the major industry players. The next we have is an insider threat. Well, you know, Joe, he has worked in the IT department for quite a long time. And he's been working for his boss, Jim, And Jim is a tyrant. I tell you what, Jim has been pestering Joe for so long that Joe has decided that on his way out, he's taken down the company. So that would be an insider threat. We see this, if you've ever heard of this, I've seen this many times, where when you work certain types of IT jobs and you turn in your letter of resignation, security escorts you out right away because they don't want you sitting there stewing and becoming an insider threat. Insider threats can also come from not just disgruntled employees as we see here or terminated employees, but also for undertrained staff. The area of undertrained staff is actually a very big issue. And the word that we use to describe undertrained staff is, oops, it was an accident. I accidentally deleted the entire database. I accidentally changed the security allowing an attack to happen. So insider threats can range from purposeful and also negligent types of threats. All right, let's look at, in terms of threats, we're going to look at intent, capability, and opportunity. This is a triad, the intent, capability, and opportunity triad. So let's start with intent. There is always an intent, always capability and opportunity in order for there to be a threat, right? Without intent, then we don't really have a threat, except for perhaps with the idea of undertrained employees that I mentioned in the last slide. So the intent is the goal of the adversary behind targeting that organization. What is their goal? Do they want to extract information? Do they want to disrupt the organization? Capability. And we get back to TTPs, which you'll see me mention over and over and over again in this course. TTPs being tactics, techniques, and procedures encompassing a wide range of activities and tools. So these are the capabilities, the TTPs, that an adversary can use on the target organization. So they have an intent, now they have a capability. So they have a tool, they have passwords, they have information, whatever it is. And then opportunity. If there is no opportunity, then the intent and capability are going to mean nothing. Opportunity could be a security vulnerability that exists in the organization. It could be a security vulnerability like improper implementation or some type of programmatic issue. All of these can provide opportunities. So once the intent and capability are available, the opportunity makes itself available to that person, that entity, and they can begin the hack. Also in cyber threat intelligence, again, we'll see that mentioned over and over again. This is a CTIA, right? So cyber threat intelligence, CTI, the analysis is performed based on the intent, capability, and opportunity triad. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to find out what the intent was, perhaps find out what tools were used to find out the capability, and then look at what opportunities, where we had weaknesses in our security. So with the study of the triad, we can evaluate, make informed, forward-leaning strategic operational tactical decisions on existing or emerging threats. So we can keep our whole organization looking forward and meet these new threats with capability. Next, we look at motives, goals, and objectives for cybersecurity attacks. So anytime there is an attack, it's going to be a motive or goal, plus a method, plus a vulnerability. Very similar to the triad that we're talking about in the previous slide. So again, we have to have a motive, we have to have a method, and there has to exist a vulnerability. Let's just look at motives for now. Right? Motives, number one, disrupting business continuity. This can be from a rival business, or it could be from a nation state, for instance. Information threat. This can be from a hacker consortium, or from even a lone wolf hacker. Manipulating data. This can be from a variety of areas of concerns of people who want to try to hack a system, manipulate that data. Create fear and chaos by disrupting critical infrastructure. This can be cyber terrorism. A financial loss to the target. Propagating religious or political beliefs. achieving states' military objectives, damaging the reputation, taking revenge, demanding ransom. One of the bullet points that I don't see on here is just for fun. There are people who have done really horrible hacks just because they thought it would be fun. So there are many different motives behind cybersecurity attacks. And it's important to know those motives in many of the methods that we use to thwart those types of attacks. Let's look at some of the hacking forums that are available. What I'm going to do is switch over to my browser, and we'll look at some of the hack forums. So this one here is Hack Forums. It's a really nice little hack forum that has everything from hack information to tech information to code, gaming information. This one is not as good for just getting the latest news, for instance, on what's going on in cybersecurity today. The next one we look at then is Hackaday. And this one gives you some fairly good news. So this one we see here, the Sci-Hub breaking down paywalls, right? The electronics of Cold War nightmares. And it goes on, many different types of topics. Some of them fairly germane to what's going on in the hacker world. The next one we have is the Ethical Hacker Network. And this definitely has a lot of very good information for ethical hackers. Ease me into cryptography, part 1, symmetric encryption, travel hacking, and it goes on. There are several different types of, you see these popping up articles here. The evaluation stage 1, defining the problem to be solved. So it really goes through how to do ethical hacking, but it also has news, and there's a community. If you go over here, click on community, and you can join this community. And if you do any of these communities, you'll be able to get updates and so on from that community. The next one we look at is Hack This Site. This is an actually very fun site, especially if you want to be a better hacker. And so you can go into the site, and this site actually has, if you look at the store, we'll just jump over there. It has even apparel and so on at the store, and also has down here different ways of obtaining information on how to hack the site. It's very, very nice. So Hack This Site is really nice. What's the next one we have here? The next one we have here is Hack5 Forum. So Hack5, if you're familiar with hack5.org, a very nice organization giving you quite a lot of information about how to hack. And in the forum, we have everything from questions to business enterprise to security, everything else, hacks and mods, and devices and cloud information that goes on and on. Again, if you're part of a forum, if there are any changes in the forum, you're going to get updated perhaps and be able to get the latest in news. Go here, we have Evil Zone, hacking and security. This is a very nice one. If you look here, one of my favorite areas about Evil Zone is the challenges. If you click on challenges, you go to categories. They have multiple hacking categories. So for instance, we're talking about web applications. Look at this one is web application security. We have exploitation, cryptography, and many different categories. And what they want to do is teach you how to hack. If you go here to the next one, it's Hack in the Box. Hack in the Box. HITB news, right? We have conferences, photos, HITB magazine. Click on more info in the news section here. Let's see what we have. All right, so cybercrime and China crypto, and it goes on and on. So plenty of news there. One of my favorite is the Hacker News, although it seems to these days have a lot of ads on it. But either way, it's a pretty good site still. Uber fined $1.1 million and so on. So it goes and talks about different hacks that have happened more recently. Go to 0x00sec. This is very nice. It has CTF. So CTF is a capture the flag. It's a way to improve your hacking skills by going through a series of methods to find, for instance, to get to root on a box or something like that. Goes into privilege escalation and so on. The next one we look at is the exploit database. This is one of the all-time most important tools to keep track of for your organization on the blue team side to make sure that your applications and network and devices are secure, but also on the red team side because there are known, if you see the green checkbox here, those are verified vulnerabilities. This one here, Netgear devices, unauthenticated remote command execution running with Metasploit. So if I click on that, this will tell me exactly what wants me to download it. This will tell me exactly what I need to do, how it works, the module, the code for it goes on, and I can actually run this directly from Metasploit and run a specific hack. So, and there's a lot more to the exploit database, but I would suggest that you go and have a look at it yourself. Packet Storm is the next one, and what I want to look at here is news, keeping track of what's going on. So widely used open source software contains Bitcoin stealing backdoor. That's been in the hacker news more recently. Google challenged over location tracking, etc. So these are just some of the sites that you can use, subscribe to, so that you can make sure that you know what's happening before it hits the nightly news. By the time it hits the nightly news, it's been over a long time. The next thing we're going to look at is understanding advanced persistent threats, or APTs. We're going to look at the characteristics, and we're also going to look at some of the advanced persistent threats in terms of its life cycle. So let's talk about a definition of an APT, or advanced persistent threat. They are a type of network attack where the attacker gains unauthorized access to a host on the target network and remains there for a long period of time. It's persistent, and they stay there, obfuscate their activities and their presence on that box. Usually they're there to get information, sensitive information. So usually it's not so that they can take down the network, take down the host, but rather to stay there and gather intel. So they might be looking for things like classified documents. If there is an improperly implemented system on a classified network, or if someone can put some type of APT on a system that will be introduced into a classified network, then perhaps they might be able to steal classified or at least highly sensitive documents. User credentials. If they can stay on that computer long enough, perhaps they'll be able to find and steal user credentials. Or maybe even just the employee or customer's personal information. And not only the personal information of the employee or their customer on that host, but also perhaps of lots of other employees on that system, on that network. Also network information. You can stay there and watch interactions, fill ARP tables, look at DNS lookups, anything involving broadcasts you can have a look at and maybe even pivot from there and use that same APT technique on other systems to get a fuller picture of what's going on with the network. Transaction information. You can collect information as to what happens every time certain types of transactions take place on that host. Maybe get credit card information, or maybe even look at the organization's business strategy and then export that information to another organization that is a competitor, or control system access information. Take control of that system and maybe even grant the attacker better access to that system or even the network. So there are many types of information that are obtained during an APT attack, and there are more beyond this. But just keep in mind that the P in APT is persistent. It stays there for a long time. So with APTs, we have objectives, right? We talked about some of those. We have timelines. When did they start gaining access to the system? How long have they been there? We have resources. We have amounts of tools, knowledge, and techniques that would be required to carry out an APT attack. We have risk tolerance. That's the level up to which the attacker remains undetected on the target network. And so if it's 200 days, that attacker has a long time to gather that information. However, if your organization has very low risk If your organization has the ability to detect APTs, then perhaps that person will only have a couple of moments to be on that system, if at all. Skills and methods, the tools that the attacker uses. Actions, what are they doing during the APT? What actions, the technical actions, are they taking? And the attack origination points, where in the world is this attack coming from? Knowing all this information, finding all these characteristics will help you avoid APT threats. Furthermore, we have numbers involved in the attack. So the number of host systems that are in the attack. So is it just one system that we've found an APT, or is it on most systems or some systems on the network? What level of the network are these in? The knowledge source, we want to find out information online about these specific types of threats that the APT represents. Multi-phased, APT attacks are usually multi-phased because before the attack happened, there had to have been a reconnaissance phase. Do we have a record of that? There had to be a gaining access phase. You can search your records for that and see if you can locate when precisely that took place. We have the discovery and the capture and the data exfiltration phases, and this multi-phase attack can actually take a fair amount of time to go from reconnaissance to exfiltration. Tailored to the vulnerabilities. So the APTs target specific vulnerabilities that are in your network or in the victim's network. So not every APT will be the same. In fact, most APTs are different because there are so many different types of hosts and so many different types of networks. And multiple points of entry can be one of the characteristics. The adversary can create multiple points of entries through the network, through the server, to maintain access to that host. They can also evade signature-based detection systems using various types of methodologies, getting around the email spam filter, getting around a IPS IDS, and there may be specific warning signs associated with the APT, including activities that are unexpected, backdoors that are found, unusual file access, uploads and downloads, traffic, database access, etc. So, you have an APT. What is the life cycle of an advanced persistent threat? Let's start with number one. Number one is preparation. So the attacker is, number one, going to define the target. And so they'll be doing researching that target to find out where they can get the tools, what tools they want to use, what are some of the vulnerabilities of that target, and maybe even organize a team and then obtain tools and then test for detection. So we find that target, we organize a team, build tools, test for detection, make sure that if the attacker is detected, they may move on to another target or try a different vector. Then we have initial intrusion, step number 2 in the APT life cycle. And this could be the deployment of malware or establishing an outbound connection. And more than likely, the attacker will have some type of control server to help facilitate the attack. And that's where the outbound connection will probably end up going. Number 3, expansion. Expand access. Obtain credentials. We're digging in deeper now. We're making sure that not only are we a user, but now perhaps a root or an administrator on that system, and maybe even creating or obtaining better credentials depending on the specific type of access that the attacker wants. Maintain access. So the attacker wants to maintain access. They want to persist in their connection and their use of that equipment. And to do that, they're going to have to wipe a few things out of the way, similar to what we see in step 6 here of the APT life cycle, which is to cover tracks, right? Remain undetected. And they need to do that in order to maintain access. And then after that, exfiltrate data. So once they've collected a huge amount of data, by the way, which is one of the telltales of compromise, one of the indicators of compromise, that we have this huge chunk of data that's accumulating. And that data is then exfiltrated, and then the person or entity who has run this APT is then going to want to clean up, cover the tracks, remain undetected. Why would they want to do that? And maybe the organization will never know that there was an APT at any time. The reason that they want to do that is so that they can come back anytime they want using the same techniques. So that is the APT lifecycle. This brings us to understanding the cyber kill chain. We're going to look at the methodology, the tactics, techniques, procedures. We're going to look at the adversary behavioral identification. We're going to also look at a deep dive kill chain scenario. And this area, we're going to look at spear phishing. So let's start with the kill chain methodology. Now, the kill chain actually started out as a military tool, and it's been since turned into a cybersecurity tool. And the cyber kill chain is a methodology that uses multiple components to help with the prevention of malicious intrusion activities. And so it gives you insight into the attack phase that you're in, helping you to analyze and understand your adversary CTPs beforehand. So what techniques, what tactics are they using? Let's look at the kill chain as an overview, and then we'll get a little bit deeper into it. We start with reconnaissance. And so if we look at an attack, the attack starts with reconnaissance. And that's where data is gathered on the target, where we probe looking for weak points. So in this case, we may be doing some type of network scan once we find open ports. If you find an open port, let's say you find that port 80 is open. What is behind that port? And a lot of people say HTTP, but HTTP isn't what we're looking for. What we want is the actual app, the program. It's an actual web server that we're looking for. So it could be Apache or IIS or Nginx or something like that. And then from there, we want to extract what the version of the web server is. How old is this web server? What's the patch level of the web server? Is the web server running specific types of software? And what are the version levels and patch levels of that software also? So that is all going on in the reconnaissance phase so that the attacker can find a good attack vector. If we can stop the attack at this point, it's much easier. So we can stop it. We say, all right, I'm being reconnoitered from a series of IP addresses from a specific location in the world. I'm going to shut that down. All right, that's great. That's the first link in the kill chain. Marvelously done. All right, well, if the attacker can complete the reconnaissance phase, then they go into weaponization to create a deliverable malicious payload using an exploit and a backdoor. So they've found that indeed port 80 is open and Apache is running. And the version of Apache that's running is running a specific tool that has an exploit. And I can write a package for it and deploy that package, that weapon, to subvert that system. And so how is that going to be delivered? The next part of the kill chain is delivery. We send the weaponized bundle to the victim. How do we do that? Sometimes you're not going to be able to find a nice open port that you can scan, like port 80. Other times you'll find that there is software that can be used, can be exploited, but you don't have a way directly into it through the network. So the next thing you do is drop a USB with malware on it in the parking lot near where employees walk. Or you sign up as the janitorial team, and while you're cleaning, plug a USB in, or some other way to get that USB in, or use other types of social engineering to make that happen. Better yet, use email. Send the victim an email, or use a text message, some type of SMS message, and somehow we deliver that weaponized bundle to the victim machine. Then, once the weaponized bundle is delivered, we go to the next link in the kill chain, which is exploitation. We take that vulnerability of that app, the vulnerability of that source code, the vulnerability of the firmware, or whatever it is. We execute the code on that system, and now whatever vulnerability it is, we've taken advantage of it. And that is the exploitation link of the kill chain. From there, we go to installation, and we're going to install other malware on the system. What's the purpose of this other malware? Well, to take down other parts of the system to allow deeper access into that host or the network. And then from there, we get into command and control. Command and control channels we use to communicate and pass data back and forth. And now we really have full control of that system or the network, allowing us to go to the last link, which is actions on objectives. So perform actions to achieve the intended goals on that system. That is the kill chain methodology. So for the kill chain methodology, what we see is there are TTPs that are used along a good part of that kill chain. The TTPs are tactics, techniques, and procedures. What does it refer to? Well, it's a pattern of activities, a pattern of methods that are associated with a specific threat actor or group of threat actors. So this is their pattern. This is a pattern that we use. The deeper you get into ethical hacking, the more you'll find that there are certain ways to get certain types of hacks done. And that TTP gives us a signature for the threat actor and the type of hack that is happening. So let's look at the first T in TTP, tactics. So this is the way the attacker performs the attack. How are they doing it? How are they handling it from beginning to end? Am I looking at a script kiddie? How do I know I'm looking at a script kiddie? Because everything that is being done for this attack is off the shelf. I can go get it from the Metasploit framework. They're included in Nmap in the script library. They are included. You can find them anywhere you want. However, there may be a tactic used by an attacker that you can tell that they wrote their own scripts, wrote their own malware, and it's completely novel. Bullet point number 2, it consists of various tactics of information gathering to perform that initial exploitation, escalation, lateral movement. So either way, what we're seeing is that there's information gathering that's happening. And this is going to be happening all along the path of the hack. So we start with the initial information gathering. Then once we get a foothold into that network, we keep having to go back through and gather more information so that we can have a clear path as to where to go. Bullet point 3, an organization can profile a threat actor based upon the tactics they use. What we find is people fall back on the same set of tools and they'll use them over and over again. And so we can get information on the threat actor, on the target. They may actually prefer specific types of targets on specific networks. And the number of entry points, we can get a good idea of who they are. So that's tactics. The next part of TTP, or tactics, techniques, and procedures, we look at is techniques. What are techniques? They can be defined, as you see here, as technical methods used by an attacker. That's the technical method that they're using during the attack. And these would include what they use technically, the method, the step-by-step methodology that they use during the initial exploitation, that they use in setting up their command and control, and in accessing the infrastructure. And again, like I say, most people will gravitate towards a certain set of tools and techniques. And it can be like the fist of that person. We use the term fist for Morse code. You can tell who somebody who's doing Morse code is by listening to the way they do things. And this is what we're doing in terms of techniques. After aggregation of techniques are used in all stages of the attack, the organization can then use the information, again, to profile the threat actor. So that's tactics, techniques. And the last letter in TTP that we're looking at is procedures. A procedure is the organizational approach followed by the threat actors to form an attack. So what we're not doing in general is just randomly attacking. There is going to be an organized set of procedures that are going to be used for the attack. So the number of actions that are going to be used can differ by threat actor and by group. Here's an example. A basic procedure for information gathering. An actor collects information about the target organization, the identity of key targets, employees, collection contact details, identifying vulnerable systems, potential entry points to the target network, and then they document all this information. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of procedure. That is a lot of organization. And if we can somehow get a whiff of the fact that this is happening on the network, we might be able to identify the threat actor. So knowing what these procedures are that are followed by the attacker, that are followed by the threat actor, helps us, again, to profile. So understanding the TTPs helps us to be able to profile, to give us an understanding of the threat actor, of the attacker that is potentially gaining access to our network. Along those same lines, we look at adversary behavioral identification. And what this does is we're looking at the identification of the methods and techniques that are followed by the adversary to launch the attack. Again, we're looking for a signature of that attack. And this might allow us to identify upcoming threats, upcoming exploits. So I'm not going to get very deep into each of these. I'll stop now and then in areas where we haven't spent much time. But we've already talked about reconnaissance, right? So that is something that is part of any initial attack. So we're going to take a little bit of a dive, an excursion into adversarial behavior identification for the CTIA. And we're going to look at 9 behaviors as part of Module 2, where we talk about the cyber threat and kill chain methodology. And we see that there are 9 different adversary behaviors that we can look at, including internal reconnaissance, use of PowerShell, unspecified proxy activities, use of command line interface, and number 5 there is HTTP user agent. Number 6, command and control server. Number 7, use of DNS tunneling. Number 8, use of web shell. And number 9, data staging. So the question that we are answering in a little bit of demo, a little bit of discussion here, the question that we're answering is, how can you tell that an adversary is at work in your network? So let's have a look at number 1, which is digital communications. In digital communications, we're going to look at internal reconnaissance, use of PowerShell, unspecified proxy activity. So let's have a look at that. The first thing we have is internal reconnaissance. And what people are looking for is the pot of gold. They want to get your data. So they're going to be using tools to reconnoiter your internal network. And those tools are going to be tools like Nmap, Nessus, Wireshark, Netcat, NetDiscover, and Ping. And so what we want to be able to do is scan for those types of activities. Let's have a quick look at how that looks on a network. What we see here is I have a VMware workstation running Kali. And one of the first things that somebody might do on the network is they might run a, let's try IPADR show. What I want to do is I want to see what subnet I'm on. And it turns out that I'm on the 192.168.161 subnet with ETH0. So you see ETH0 right here. There's a subnet that I'm on. So I have that. So now that I know that, I can begin to look at the network to which this host is attached. And so one of the first things I might do is a NetDiscover. I'm going to do a TAC R here. Normally, I say TAC when I'm in Linux or Unix, and I say dash when I'm in Windows, so differentiate between the two. But we do a netdiscover TAC-R, and then we need the subnet 192.168.161.0/24, 24 being the 24 bits of the subnet mask, which would be a 255.255.255.0. So let's hit enter here. And what this is going to do is scan. Now, if I am on the cybersecurity defense side, one of the things I'm going to be looking for is a spike in scanning activity. Now, this scan that I did, which we see right now is already finished. See that says it's finished? It would be a very small blip, but we're going to do another scan that will show up a much larger on your cybersecurity defense programs, anything that's sniffing, looking for this type of activity. So now what we'll do is let's run nmap. Nmap, and I'm not going to use any complicated nmap commands in this case. There are lots of commands that you can do. And I'm just going to pick on 129. So I'm just going to run a quick nmap command. And when you run nmap, depending on the sophistication of the command, or if you're using scripts or whatever, it can actually take a long time on a specific network. And in this case, I get some specific information on a specific host. So there are a lot of other commands, a lot of other tools that can be used to put together that kind of activity. So what we need to do as cybersecurity experts is to scan for that, look for unusual activity in terms of internal reconnaissance. Next we look at, after internal reconnaissance, a use of PowerShell. And so with PowerShell, let's go have a look at PowerShell. And in PowerShell, we can do almost anything that you can do in regular, if you have a command shell opened up. You can even use Linux commands, for instance, like for instance, I could do an ls instead, right? And then there are a whole series of commands that you can use, like get-net. I'm hitting a tab here, net64 for configuration, that's for tunneling. Let's just do a net IP address, IP a tab, and it'll give me all the IP addresses on my interface. All right. Also, I can do a lot of scripting with PowerShell. I can take the scripts and I can run them across the domain, across the network, and so that can be very dangerous. And with that danger in mind, one of the commands that we should look at is this one, get that execution policy. And we see here is the execution policy is set to restricted, and that means that a user on a Windows 10 box will not be able to run a PowerShell script, and that's default on a Windows 10 box. You can use the set execution policy and change it to whatever you want and make this so that it's completely unrestricted in terms of running PowerShell scripts. Now, in order to do that, you have to have administrative rights on the PC, which is another issue to make sure that we distribute our images without administrative rights for the users and make sure that our user accounts don't have that capability. So the ability to run scripts across a network is something that we want to make sure and stifle. We don't want that to happen on our network. So PowerShell, I wish I had more time to go into PowerShell. It's a very powerful tool, but we don't. Let's go on to the next section here. Okay, so where we want to look then is some of the things that you want to do to make sure that PowerShell is not being used by any other people or entities in your organization other than your network admins, etc., who need to use it. And here are some things that you need to do. Number one is remove PowerShell v2. And you can install Windows. There's a little checkbox for additional features to add PowerShell v2, and that's sometimes done for backward compatibility. If you upgrade Windows 10, you've upgraded from a previous operating system, sometimes PSV2 is included. Get rid of it. PS lockdown policy, constrained language mode, very good ways to get rid of problems with people being able to run scripts, or either accidentally or on purpose, in PowerShell. AppLocker and DeviceGuard, very good tools to use. AppLocker is a whitelisting tool that will help make sure that only appropriate executables run in your systems. PowerShell code signing. You can set this up for all PowerShell use. I would suggest that all PowerShell code is signed before it's run, and that is a policy on your system. Also, PowerShell activity logging for your activity logs in all of your devices, and then that would feed up to your SIM systems. Those SIM systems would look at that activity. And then just enough administration, right? We want to limit administration to what exactly is needed and nothing else. Now we look at unspecified proxy activity, and what we see with unspecified proxy activity is proxies being used to usually exfiltrate data and obfuscate activities on a network. And so things like CyberGhost VPN, BetterNet Unlimited free VPN proxy, the Tor browser. Let's have a quick look at one of these. We'll look at the Tor browser. So here we have the Tor browser. Very amazing little browser. What the Tor browser does is it connects through to a secure service to make sure that all activity is hidden. And as you can see, one of the things that it does is it connects through to DuckDuckGo. So we're not using Google. All of the searching that we do and we look at is done through the Tor network. And so we can do things like dark web searches, etc. We'll see that more when we get to the lab and so on. So quite a lot of capability in terms of hiding your activity, the Tor browser. And beside the Tor browser, we also see Easy Hide IP, Hide All IP, and I'm sure that you may have some other experience with other apps and capabilities to create proxies to hide activity. And so proxies are nice, and so you'll find them used quite a lot by people who are trying to run nefarious activities on your network. All right, now we look at use of CLI, we look at HTTP user agent, and command and control services. All right, so use of CLI. What's a CLI? CLI is a command line interface. And so anything like your PowerShell that we saw earlier, any type of command line interface from Linux, etc., we use, or an actor, a threat actor will use for script execution, like we talked about PowerShell, Python, Perl, Bash, etc. Also processes whose names are random letters and numbers will often be spawned by somebody who is on your system, a threat actor, using a CLI. And if you are looking for use of CLI, you can also look at processes that are named to look like legitimate processes. But if you hash them, you'll see that they are not. So like svhost is what I call it, which is servicehost.exe, and it'll have a 0 instead or something like that, so that when you look at it and scan it, you see it and it looks like it's legitimate, but that 0 gives it away. Downloads from the internet, so you'll see commands like wget or curl that are being used to download from the internet, especially from devices that you would normally not expect that type of activity. User management commands that are executed from unexpected places, things like user add and net user, Active Directory commands, etc. People who are trying to create accounts to escalate privileges. So that's use of CLI. And next we look at HTTP user agent. And so the HTTP user agent, it's a little piece of a client software that we see with the user agent header. If you actually look at the header, and it's there so that malware can communicate with command and control servers, and you'll find this using the HTTP user string. And you can detect that using Wireshark. I ran a little Wireshark here and ran a little filter, which is the http.user_agent. And in order for this to work, I had to go to a website that was HTTP, not HTTPS. And I was able to grab some information from there. And there's also, you can take headers and run them through useragentstring.com. So if you go to useragentstring.com, it can help you detect illicit user agents. And also there are user agents blacklists, and you may have automation in your SIEM systems and any of your detection systems that automatically download and detect using UA blacklists. And so the question that we're answering for the HTTP user agent is, did any system on my network communicate over HTTP using a suspicious or unknown user agent? So suspicious, it's on a UA blacklist. Unknown, we're not sure if it's suspicious, but it is traffic that just looks odd. Now, the next thing we look at is the command and control server. Command and control server is usually a LAMP server. A LAMP server is a Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP server. And these are very easy to set up. And that's the basis for the server. They allow you to do command and control once you have an APT on a system, an advanced persistent threat. You can create LAMP servers on Azure, AWS, even local servers. There are builder kits to put this together, like ICE9 and Neutrino Botnet Builder, and many others out there. You can download and build your own botnet enterprise if you want. And so just to demonstrate how easy it was, and I'm not going to do that right now, but this is something I built. You can see there's my little name here. Very easy to set up a command and control server on AWS in the free tier. And so what I did is I just implemented the LAMP server, and then from there I can quickly upload and install and configure my CNC software to help control my botnet or any other type of malware that I have on a target system. So if I'm a threat actor, this is easy. And when I'm finished, I can just get rid of this server. It no longer exists. It's in the cloud. I can set these up AWS, Azure. I can have an entire array or several arrays of LAMP servers to do CNC work around the world if I want to. And if it looks like I've been caught, well, I just spin that server down. That MAC address disappears forever. IP address is gone. And I can start command and control over again from another server. Very easy to spin up. And so LAMP servers for command and control. Next, we look at use of DNS tunneling, use of web shell, and data staging. So with DNS tunneling, what we have is we have a local host that's a DNS client that is going to be making use of the local DNS server to get around firewalls. What we want to do is we have captive hosts to our firewall. We want to be able to get around that so we can exfiltrate data. As we see here, when we create that DNS tunnel, what the threat actor will do is set up the tunnel client, which you see down here on the left. And the tunnel client just send out a request on port 53. Remember, DNS is port 53, UDP, and TCP, to a DNS tunnel server. And then the server can use that to this tunnel to direct C2 callbacks. And they're going to make use of the TXT field in the DNS response message. And so if this malicious DNS tunneling goes unobserved, obviously we're going to have a great risk, because that means that somebody can have a command and control capability, can exfiltrate data even around our firewall or captive host that we have set up. So if you want to detect use of DNS tunneling, there are several things to keep in mind. So number one, detect untrusted domains. So if there are domains that are not trusted by your organization, have a look at what they are, who they are, and then what you do is channelize all your domain detection. So you create channels based upon source destination IP address and on a per domain session. Then you take those channels that you've created and enumerate the queries to determine if you have any excessive queries. So you enumerate these to look for excessive queries on a per domain basis. Right? So we have a channel. It's a specific source destination IP address, a specific domain, and then we look at that channel and we say, are there excessive queries? And then at the same channel, we check for unique domain generation. And even outside of the channelization that we're talking about, we want to make sure that if there is a lot of unique domain generation, that we capture that and note it. Also, we want to filter for the average domain length. So what is the average domain length? How many characters is it? Well, what if I have a lot of domains all of a sudden that fall outside of that average? Well, I should flag that also. And also classifies any channelized traffic flows as either malicious or normal. All right, so now I see that I've established a normal flow of DNS traffic, and now I find some outliers to that normal flow. For instance, the outliers are outliers because of excessive unique domain generation, excessive queries, excessive domain length, also randomized characters in the domain name, etc. And then what I can do is classify those as potentially malicious, tag them, flag them, and then examine them to make sure that they're not DNS tunneling. Now we see use of web shell. So a web shell is also a potentially dangerous tool. The reason web shells exist is because of flaws in your web stack. So where you have your SQL Server, your middleware, and the top level of the, usually it's a three-tier stack, and it's been implemented improperly. And so what will happen is a threat actor will install a web shell. Here we see here we have the B374K web shell running on Windows. And what that does is allows the use of data exfiltration, manipulation, and many other, depending on where you have the web shell and what its capabilities are, it can be extremely dangerous to your organization. So you never want to have a web shell on one of your web servers. So how do we prevent it? Several things. We'll kind of go over these very quickly. First of all, you want to disable any dangerous PHP functions like exec and shell_exec and pass-through, etc. Want to make sure that unauthorized users don't have access to any of those scripts. You want to check to see if your web application is using upload forms, and if so, make sure they're secure. Right? Never trust user input, because as a user, as a form, I should say, a user puts information into that form. We can use that form to do all kinds of stuff. Like, for instance, we can use the form to get to a root directory. We can use the form to run SQL queries. We can use the form to do all kinds of stuff. So never should that be trusted. Each field should be parsed to make sure that it conforms to specific standards. Don't blindly use code that you may find online forums and websites. And we talk about this in many of my other classes. We want to make sure that any code that we make and use is original. We didn't just copy and paste it from GitHub or wherever. In the case of WordPress, try to avoid installing third-party plugins if you don't need them. So don't play with plugins. Make sure that you have reputable and trusted plugins. Disable PHP execution in sensitive directories. So why would you need PHP execution capabilities in images or uploads? But the problem is in your implementation, if you follow the default for your implementation, that permission might be there. It might allow you to execute PHP in the images folder. And as a hacker, I'm going to check that. I'm going to check and see if I can do PHP execution in one of these kind of obscure folders comparatively. And if so, then that's where I'm going to run my code. All right, lock down the web server's user permissions. You want to make sure that you have, as an organization, that you know exactly what you're going to use. in terms of user permissions, and that policy is enacted upon every web server. All right. Also, I would add to this to make sure that you are aware of all web servers in your entire organization. That there aren't web servers running on devices, web servers running on hosts, web servers running in anywhere else that are not being implemented according to your policy by your organization. The last thing we look at is data staging. And data staging is usually preparatory to exfiltration. They're trying to get data out, so they're staging it, collecting it. And so how would you find it? Well, number one, you monitor for malicious file transfers. And one of the ways to do that is to use file integrity monitoring. And you could obviously monitor your event log, scan for abnormal storage patterns on hosts and servers. Do we really need to have megabytes or gigabytes in one place, or has it been growing? Have you seen a repository of data growing quickly over time? One of the things that makes it difficult to find data staging is it is like so many parts of threat actors, hacking, it is ephemeral. In other words, they use it for a little while, then get rid of it. So you need to find it while it's happening, or with your systems, you review the logs and look in the past and find out if there was data staging going on. So what we see is there are a lot of areas that we need to look at in terms of abnormal behaviors on your network to make sure that you are secure and that threat actors aren't camped out on your network getting ready to escalate privileges to the next phase of the hack. All right, so that's all we have here for adversarial behavior identification. And now we'll go back to our lecture. All right, so in the kill chain deep dive scenario, let's look at spear phishing. What is spear phishing? Have you ever been out in the Atlantic and you're on the prow of a ship with a spear just hunting for that great big tuna? Me either. So, but spear phishing is like that though in cybersecurity, because you're not looking for a big tuna, you're looking for the big kahuna. You're looking for the people who run the organization, the people who are the director level and up, managers, people who have quite a lot of money and influence in the organization, right? We want to find specifically those big shots and target them. So this is something that would definitely be attractive to certain types of threat actors. So let's look at the kill chain, and we'll look at the scenario and some of the use cases if there are any. So the first part of the kill chain is reconnaissance. So in the scenario, the target organization's employee posts information about his project. You've seen this before on LinkedIn, right? You get all kinds of good cred on LinkedIn if you write, and people like your writes or share what you write on LinkedIn, or maybe on Facebook or other social media, or maybe even in some type of professional journal. Hey, I'm running this huge project and it involves the following things and it's pretty amazing, right? And so with that, they announce their position in the organization, and this information becomes public knowledge. Ha-ha! There's somebody at which I can aim my spear phishing. So the adversary gathers contact information of the target employee from that social engineering site. You know, LinkedIn is an amazing site for networking, getting jobs. It's the Facebook of the business world. However, it's also a great place to meet your doom in terms of cybersecurity. So you be careful what you put out there on any social engineering site. So we have reconnaissance. That's the first link of the kill chain. It's very difficult to stop this from happening. The only way that we could have stopped this from happening is to limit the data that employees are allowed to post about what they do on social media. So if your organization says you cannot post any project information on social media, that's a good idea. Next is weaponization. So the adversary creates a deliverable malware payload using an exploit and backdoor. and prepares the command and control server to manage the activity on that network, and then you draft a plausible phishing email with the payload attached, and they assure that the antivirus doesn't detect the attachment. So for instance, let's say, there's a couple of ways that this can happen. One way I've seen this happen is for people with LinkedIn on their phones. Somebody will contact them in sending them a chat and say, hey, I was looking at the project that you were posting about, and I've worked on a very similar product, and I've actually posted something that I think will blow your mind. It's really cool. Just click on this link. What is that? That's the payload. The user clicks on the link, and then you can go from wherever you want from there. Use the phone to get to the Wi-Fi network or to the PC if the phone is connected to the PC using Bluetooth or USB or whatever. Start there perhaps. Or start on the PC by contacting again through a email or through some type of text and so on. And another way that this is done is the threat actor will create a very sophisticated fake account on LinkedIn and actually have legitimate discussions with the target for a period of time. And so the target will go to trust the threat actor, and so when that link is sent, they will be very likely to click on it. So that's weaponization. And weaponization, once they've got it prepared, we want it delivered, so we send that phishing email. The email passes through the target organization's antiviral protection. Perhaps it is a file that looks like a PDF, but it's not. Or it looks like a GIF or a JPEG, but it's not. And so it gets past the antivirus protection. So use cases. Our first use case. Suspicious attachment including the password in an email message. That is very possibly an issue. I mean, if you have a password as an attachment. Suspicious file type download. And most anti-malware products that are integrated with email resources are able to look for file type obfuscation and find that it's actually an executable or some other type of malware. So from delivery, we now go to exploitation. The target has clicked on the link, downloaded the malware. The malware made it past filters. And so they open that legitimate looking email from a legitimate seeming fake account on LinkedIn, and the exe is executed, installs several files, and the root folder modifies registry keys. The adversary takes advantage of the unpatched vulnerability to the target system to begin to escalate privileges. So use cases, what? Malware infects the system. So at that point, we can stop this. We say, hey, I found malware on the system. Let's kill that malware. Or execution of malicious program, right? It's not whitelisted. If that user is fortunate enough to be running in an organization that will only allow whitelisted programs to run, then when that executable tries to run, it'll be stopped. But I tell you, most organizations don't do that. That takes quite a lot of effort to maintain whitelisted programs on a wide basis. And the larger corporations, multi-billion dollar organizations, Fortune 500, they all do that. But once you get to the medium size, which many of you are in, or smaller organizations, which many of you are in, most people are in small businesses. Most people in the United States are in small businesses. So those are the ones that I find most vulnerable because they don't take use or make use of these technologies that are available. So if it's not whitelisted, if your anti-malware doesn't detect it, then you have allowed that part of the kill chain to get right past you. The next is installation. So the malware is launched after installation, which leads to persistent access to the target system. It sends a signal to establish a back channel with the command and control server using what we talked about before. Remember HTTP proxy servers? And that organization's HTTP proxy server, and spreads the infection perhaps to other systems on the network. And how can we kill this activity at this point of the kill chain? Well, we might see suspicious activity on the proxy server. Track that back to the systems that have been infected and take it down from there. Or execution of a new program that's not whitelisted. Again, we look at whitelisted traffic or whitelisted applications on a system. So if you don't have a system of whitelisting, or you don't have adequate proxy server monitoring, then we go to the next link in the kill chain, because we're almost dead here. So a command and control. The adversary obtains locally stored password hashes and a hash of the user account in the domain admin group on another workstation, and the adversary establishes two-way communications. So we're going to be using a CNC server, that command and control, using HTTP, perform remote exploitation of that network. Right? So now the network is able, that system is able to be exploited because we may not have a command and control blacklist. There are downloadable blacklists that you can use for your edge protection services that will say, hey, these are command and control networks. You want to make sure and block any access to these command and control networks. Next, we see domains access are not in the whitelist. Again, we go back to the fact that on our servers and on our workstations, we should be whitelisting applications. That means that only those applications can run. Any new application that attempts to run or get installed will be blocked. And also, we should be looking for and constantly scanning for protocol vulnerabilities. In this case, we didn't, so we go to the next link in the kill chain. Actions on objectives. So the adversary searches for files of interest. They find and collect those files. They will put them in a RAR or zip archive. They transfer that RAR archive from the target system to drop servers through the organization's proxy server. And they can use admin privileges. They have RAR files. They have credentials being used, same credentials on multiple systems. All of this is easily detected and stopped if you have a correct method for detection set up in your organization. Right? All of these can be easily stopped. I can think of many ways to do this from a Windows perspective and a Linux perspective, just from a system admin perspective, not to mention some type of endpoint security. So the kill chain, there are many different ways that we can, or many different points in the link of the kill chain, that we can stop nefarious activity from threat actors from compromising our systems. But what are the indicators of compromise? Let's look at that next. We're going to look at the indicators of compromise, why they're important, some of the categories, the key indicators of compromise, and lastly, we need to turn on the echo for this, the pyramid of pain. So we'll look at that briefly also. All right, let's start with indicators of compromise, or IOCs. These are clues, artifacts, pieces of forensic data on the network, on hosts, on routers, on switches, on operating systems that indicate that there's been a potential intrusion, that there has been potential malicious activity on that organization's infrastructure. They're indicators of compromise. The IOCs itself are not intelligence. They kind of act as just a good source of information about threats. They're data points in the intelligence process, because the I in IOC, they're just indicators. So what we need to do as security analysts is be continually monitoring for the presence of indicators of compromise so that we can respond to any threat after we detect it. Of course, we have to detect it first in order to respond to it. So why are IOCs, or indicators of compromise, important? Well, bullet point number 1, they help to detect data breaches, malware intrusions, other types of threat activities. Because what will happen is you'll have a well-developed list of indicators of compromise, And you'll tune your endpoint services to look for these indicators of compromise. You can even write scripts to programmatically adapt to new IOCs. You can get your team up to date, your cybersecurity team up to date on the latest IOCs so that when they see these on their scans, they'll be ready to act. So they really help in detecting those data breaches. They help you know what happened if there is an attack, because we can go back and look at the IOCs and put together a picture. They help improve response time, also upgrade or update the detection rate. So we might get the compromise before it happens. So we see all these telltales, we see all these IOCs, and we realize, hey, wait a minute, there's an attack happening. And then we take action to head it off, and our detection rate is better, and our ability to thwart those attacks is much faster. Provides security analysts with data feeds that can be fed into the organization's auto response mechanism. You know, it is not the security analyst sitting around all day looking through copious amounts of data that is going to be the way that we discover these IOCs necessarily. More than likely, it's going to be part of our auto response mechanism. And so we're going to feed this information, the IOCs, programmatically into our endpoint auto response systems, and they'll catch these IOCs for us. Helps us answer the following questions. Does the file contain malicious content? Is the organization's network compromised? If so, how did it get affected? What is the history of this specific IP address? Those are some questions that IOCs help us to answer. There are several different categories of indicators of compromise. To understand IOCs, what we want to do is quickly, again, detect threats of an organization, but we have many different indicators. So these are some of the categories. There are four categories, and those are email indicators. And email indicators are used to send malicious data to target organizations or an individual. So we're going to look at email in this case. So we might look at the address. This is, by the way, email indicators are going to be in the header of the email, right, including the address, the subject, attachments, links also. So you might have an attachment or links in the email that turn out to be malware delivery tools. Then we go to the header of the email, and we can find the source address, the source domain, and start our investigation. Network indicators. They're useful for command and control, malware delivery, identifying operating systems, identifying programs, looking for scripts, etc., including URLs, domain names, IP addresses. And so we might say, hey, wait a minute, I see a series of IP addresses coming from China that weren't there yesterday or this morning. Or I get a new domain that has never showed up on my system before, on my network before. Whatever it is, these are network indicators. Next, we get to host-based indicators. And we do an analysis on an infected system within the network, and we look for file names, hashes, registry keys, DLLs, mutex, etc. There are so many different things that we can look for on the host itself as an example of an indicator that there's been some type of compromise on that host. Behavioral indicators to identify specific behaviors related to that activity. So including things like some type of document might be executing a script, a PowerShell script, a Bash script. There could be remote command execution coming from within or outside of the network. Those types of things are behavioral indicators that indicate that your system, your host or your network has been compromised. So, key indicators of compromise. Number one, unusual outbound network traffic. Number two, unusual activity through a privileged user account. Number three, we'll pause here, geographic anomalies. What does that mean? That means that the IP addresses that we're seeing show up are from areas that our organization doesn't usually communicate. So if you notice that you're getting a lot of IP activity from Tierra del Fuego, right, which is the tip of South America? Why am I having activity from Tierra del Fuego or from the Maldives or from somewhere in China or Hong Kong? That is a geographical anomaly. You don't have any employees there, perhaps, and so there's no reason that you should be having any communication from there. Multiple login failures. We see that if someone's trying to over and over again crack a password, right? Increased database read volume. With database read volume, what happens is somebody's running a SQL hack against your MySQL database or your Microsoft SQL Server or your Oracle servers, whatever it is. And so now those databases are outputting a lot of data they didn't used to be. What's going on? Large HTML response type. So the response size of HTML, those should be, let's say, about 250K. Well, what if you're looking at 250 meg HTML responses? Well, someone is probably trying to move a lot of data. So we want to check for that. Or there could be extremely long command strings. Multiple requests from the same file. Again, someone is trying to get information on that file. Mismatched port application traffic. Someone is trying to obfuscate ports. Suspicious registry or system file changes. Again, the registry, just like your programmatic infrastructure, your executables, should be whitelisted. So somebody should not be able to make changes en masse to registries on systems. Unusual DNS requests, we talked about that a little bit already. Unexpected patching of systems. Yeah, that's not a real patch, is it? So we want to make sure that we keep our eye on that. Signs of DDoS activity. With DDoS activity, what we see is a huge uptick in the amount of frames that are being thrown at a specific device, program, web server. Bundles of data in the wrong places. Why would this particular host have an extra 250 gigs of data? That's crazy, and it's been growing over the last day or two. What's going on? So we're looking for data that shows up in the wrong places. Web traffic with superhuman behavior. So if I go to a website, how many searches, changes, clicks am I going to make per second? Well, actually, it's probably going to be measured on a per minute basis, right? However, if that turns into 50 clicks, searches, or whatever per second, that's not a human doing that. That's a machine, and it's written to try to compromise a system. So those are some of the key indicators of compromise. And they bring us now to the pyramid of pain. So what the pyramid of pain represents is the type of indicators that the analyst needs to look out for to detect activity of an adversary. And so, for instance, if we go down here to the lowest level of the pyramid of pain, hash values, we can very easily look at hash values and compare hash values. If you look at the bottom of the pyramid, it'll have less impact on the adversary if we find or detect hash values. They can easily change it. We find IP addresses. They could easily change those, right? Domain names. It's simple to change, bob and weave with domain names. So we're playing a game with the adversary. Now we have network or host artifacts. So if I do that at this level, it's very annoying for the attacker, but they can still find out what the hosts or the domains or the networks are, right? I placed a few things in their way. But what about tools? Well, it can be challenging if I make specific tools unavailable, or I have anti-malware or other automated services that look for specific types of tools, because as an attacker, I'm going to want to install those tools on a system to which I've gained access. And so that can be challenging. And so what the attacker can do is write their own tools, which will get them past this level. But then when we get to TTPs, when I'm changing those around, it can be very, very tough for the attacker. And so that pyramid of pain, what we want to do is make the attacker slog through our network. Hopefully, they'll give up after a certain amount of time because there's no low-hanging fruit. Right, so that's the pyramid of pain. And what we've seen in this module is we've seen the various cyber threats, categories. We've looked at the threat actors and goals and motivations for cybersecurity attacks. We've looked at APTs, advanced persistent threats, and the APT life cycle. We also looked at the cyber kill chain methodology with the tactics and techniques and TTPs. We've looked at IOCs, those indicators of compromise, the different types of them. And in the next module, we're going to discuss topics that are related to threat intelligence. What are the requirements for a threat intelligence program? What about the planning, or the direction and the review for a threat intelligence program? All right, so that's all for Module 2.